You're listening to Rule the Galaxy podcast. I'm Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dulon, Star Wars Rebels. May the Force be with you always.
Hey, Star Wars fans and Rule the Galaxy fans. It is Joe in the pilot seat. Last week, we were able to do a nice special side show with one of my favorite guys, Mr. Mark Newbold of Making Tracks, Fantha Tracks, Star Wars, pretty much everything. The plan was to have his cohort, his partner in crime, with us, but it didn't work out. And I felt so bad because it seemed like every time we try to work it out, this timing doesn't work. So we're going to do another special show this week. And this time I'm going to have a show, just me and Mr. Mark Mulcaster, who I said to Mr. Mark Newbold last week was, if you're talking about Martin and Lewis, Mark's more the Dean Martin, Mark Mulcaster's more the Jerry Lewis, I feel like, of their comedy scene. Maybe I'm way off base, but Mark, so glad to have you a part of Rule the Galaxy again. How are you?
I'm very well, and thanks for having me back. Yeah, and it was totally my fault last week for not being able to get on there. But that is also the perils and the pitfalls of working in TV, unfortunately. So
yeah. So you're with Sky, correct?
that's right. Yeah. I work for Sky, and I've worked for Sky TV, which is like the UK's largest broadcaster, now owned by NBC, so Comcast. So I've worked with them for almost 20 years. So and I work in post-production in finishing. So I'm what's known as a colorist. So if you're watching all the shows, a colorist, not necessarily me, but a colorist is giving it the look, it's balancing the cameras, it's making day turn for night and stuff like that, and setting the mood. Working in conjunction with, say, the director and the director of photography to kind of really realize their vision. So it's quite a cool job.
Gotcha. Well, I you know what? That's going to take me down our first rabbit hole that I wasn't even expecting to talk about. But so NBC has been affiliated with the Olympics forever. Are you going to have to do any work with? Is Sky also, now that they're with NBC, part of that or doing coverage of that?
No. So basically, because Sky isn't a public broadcaster, so like it's all subscription. We don't tend to show the Olympics over here. We might show, because we have on our service, we have like Eurosport, and I think like Discovery also does like some of the Olympics now, but it's normally the BBC and ITV which will do that, because basically it's the Olympics. It's a bit like the Euros and the World Cup. We don't touch that because people tend to moan that they have to pay for something that really is it shouldn't, you shouldn't have to pay for. But Premier League, Formula One, all that kind of stuff, that's kind of our stuff when it comes to sport. Anyway, I tend to work in entertainment, so I work in a lot of documentaries and things like that. So
well, that's going to take me down another one, because America has become a little football or soccer crazy. With the mixture of Ted Lasso, the Premier League being on every week here, the Serie A in Italy being on here every week, all that kind of stuff. Now the World Cup and the Euros, World Cup coming to the U.S. next year. The other thing that's kind of gotten a little crazy here in the U.S. is Welcome to Wrexham, the Ryan Reynolds,
right?
Rob McElhenney show. Have you checked that out or seen any of that?
I've seen bits of it. It's not necessarily the kind of thing that I tend to watch. But I have seen bits of it. Just I think the problem is when you work like in TV, I mean, you know how the sausage is made, as it were. So you know what's going on, and especially kind of shows that may or may not have are meant to be kind of like fly on the wall, quote unquote, but very constructed. I'm thinking, it it rings even less true, so it becomes obviously just entertainment. And from my point of view, I mean, some stuff, like the worst examples will be like, Marriage at First Sight and stuff like that, where
Yeah.
everything is ratcheted, like all the tension, like every time somebody says something, there's a snare hit on the the soundtrack, and there's tension drones, and it's just like the editor's gone through and they found like somebody looking a bit kind of like annoyed or miffed, and it might be 10 minutes like further down from the conversation, they cut it all in just to build the tension and build a story that really probably didn't actually happen in the way that it did. So I don't tend to kind of like look at all that stuff. However, I did watch a really cool documentary, and I don't know. I mean, if your listeners are interested in that, but there's a part of London, kind of like a borough of London called Camden Town,
Okay.
which is a very famous kind of music scene. There's a brilliant documentary series. I didn't work on it, on Disney Plus, and it's just called Camden, and it just kind of it's just shot really beautifully. It's produced by Dua Lipa, so there's
Oh yeah.
actually a bit of clout behind it, and they have. I mean, I'm really rubbish when it comes to music, popular music names anyway, but Chris whatever from Coldplay, so they've got some big names talking about it, and it's just like a really nice, like really well-rounded documentary that, if you haven't been to London and been to Camden Town, is definitely worth checking out, because it's just a really kind of interesting kind of place.
Well,
I mean, I couldn't even give you like the equivalency in the US.
no, that's cool. I never thought that I would probably go check out London or England or
Mm,
anything like that, but um, with the Ted Lasso show, with the Welcome to Wrexham show, and I know that's in Wales.
yeah.
And then I've made friends with one of the IndyCar drivers. His name's Jack Harvey, and he's from England. And
Okay.
is it Lincoln something? It's a small football team that he roots on. I can't remember. I think it's Lincoln something. Anyway, but
Mm,
he's friends with my son, and we've become friends through that. And he's offered. He's like, if you guys ever want to go, let me know. We'll go there. We'll check all this out. I'll show you all these things. And so now I'm kind of going to my wife, going, maybe we put that on the list because
definitely.
I mean,
Yeah.
and plus I get to hang out with you two, the
Hey,
Mark,
yeah,
brothers.
we'll go
So
and do some Star Wars location hunting around London or something if you want. We'll go and do all the Andor ones. We'll go up to Scotland and that.
oh,
The Fantha Tracks team are well across all that. See,
good.
when it comes to location, I'm less actually excited by Star Wars locations. I'm more about James Bond locations, because they're a little bit more real world.
Okay.
Whereas Star Wars sometimes is like, oh yeah, so this was a lake that they used in Takadona, but it's like, yeah, they used it as a VFX plate, but then there's so much manipulation and
Right.
stuff. It's you have to kind of squint and imagine. So
Yeah, exactly. I could see where you're talking about real world. You can actually see, oh, that was the scene they shot, right,
yeah,
for
yeah,
for 007. But here's the lake. There's nothing around it. And oh, by the way, you're just getting this little glimpse of it. Yeah, like you said, imagine that that's there, or that statue's there, or that
yeah.
ship's there, or
I
whatever.
mean, Andor's pretty good for that. I mean, when you there's scenes in London which kind of double for Coruscant around like the ISB building, that you can
Mhm.
literally. I mean, what is really cool is that if you get a screen grab and you stand in the right position, or even with your camera, you can pretty much line it up so it's pretty much the same, and you can then start to imagine where they would have literally drawn the set extension, and the digital stuff and that. So it is. I mean, it's still pretty cool, and I like Scotland's just a beautiful place all around up with the locks and stuff. I mean, that whole kind of planet really is quite sparse, isn't it? I can't remember the names. There's so much new Star
I
Wars.
know. I know.
I was driving back actually and trying to remember, just randomly, like it's like, what's that guy's name from Kenobi? And it's just like, I have no idea, because they're so
Yeah.
disposable these days.
It's
For lack
it.
of a better term.
I don't know if it's better or worse, because one, I think all these new things are drawing in new people from new
Yeah,
perspectives, new age groups, all that kind of stuff. But two, for a guy like you, me, or Mark, for me it was pretty simple. I had to know like 5 or 6 planet names, the Empire and the Rebels, and that was
yeah,
it for a long, long time. And then things grew and you added more. And heck, with the books, I didn't even try to remember all those names. I mean, I love the EU books and everything, but that was even too much to bring on. So now with this new animated and new live action Star Wars that's out,
Yeah.
I think, we run a Star Wars podcast, and I still have to write down the names of, oh, this character I want to talk about. Oh, I better write down the name, because
Yeah.
if not, I'm going to do exactly like you
Yeah.
said and go, the one guy in the one scene, and there's, as you know from doing this, there's 10 people listening going, it's this person, you
You
idiot,
idiot.
you run a podcast,
Exactly. Yeah.
so
I mean, whenever we do an episode of reaction chats or even making tracks, sometimes I just have to have IMDb open, just because. I mean, and that's the thing, the cast, are quite big, and we've just had an episode of The Acolyte where they've just annihilated like 3/4 of a
yes,
cast, which is cool. But like, I mean, obviously some of those Jedi didn't even have names. Now we know probably if they ever bother to do a visual dictionary or they make
right,
it onto a Black Series box, they will probably get a name. They're going to have to. They can't just be called generic Jedi 1, 2, and 3 or something.
right.
Which would be
It
kind of
can't,
cool if they did.
can't
But
be Kebab 1 and Kebab 2, right? Yeah, like you guys were
exactly,
talking.
yeah. Sheesh, yeah,
Shish and kebab.
yeah. There you go.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so many people that I grew up with and still talk to about it today, that, they said we learned the characters' names from the back of the cards, right? The back of,
Mm,
or either the Star Wars actual trading
cards.
cards, or
Yeah,
for the action figure cards.
yeah.
And, I mean, just to think about it now, it's so weird to think that, well, one, it's not always even easy to buy or get the action figures unless you
Right.
pre-order this,
Yeah.
that, and the other. So yeah, it's kind of weird. And look, I'm all for it. I think more people under the tent, the better.
Hmm.
And I think, again, I talk about entry points for everything, whether it's you got into it because of video games or Lego or the animated stuff, whatever. If it brings you in and you want to talk and be a fan of Star Wars, I'm okay with it. And
Yeah.
one of the things that you and I probably will talk about here is, um, you know, not every show is going to hit everybody the same way. I love Kenobi. Like I actually love Ewan McGregor's version of it, and it really grew my love for Alec Guinness's version of it, and James Arnold Taylor did so well with it. I mean, there's so many different aspects of Kenobi that I loved, and I really
Mm.
wanted to love the Kenobi show, but
Yeah.
I just thought it was okay. I
It
mean,
was okay.
there
Yeah.
were some cool scenes and it was great to see Ewan back in it, So I
Mhm.
mean, even for a person like me who that's one of their main characters that they follow and love, it doesn't always hit 100%, I
No.
mean,
And to be honest, I think for me, that's probably been one of the hardest transitional periods in the last, I'm going to say last 18 months. We were quite lucky with The Mandalorian.
mhm,
And I, for one, I, for one, really rated at least the first two of a sequel trilogy films. Like, I'm a big defender of The Last Jedi. Um, Well, actually, I'm not. No, I'm not even a defender because, like, if you don't like Last Jedi, but I've realised by now I can't change anybody's mind. So I just feel like, but I appreciate it for what for some of that stuff. But after kind of the second season of Mando, which was again like a oh my god kind of like ending, the I found it really difficult to kind of reconcile the fact that actually it's okay to not love every bit of Star Wars. And
yeah,
for Mrs., she has this tendency to say, we'll be talking to her friends, and they might start a conversation about whatever, the Acolyte or Ahsoka, and they go, well, what do you reckon, Mark? And Karen be like, don't ask him because he can't say anything bad about Star Wars. And I'm just like, well, I can, but I'm not going to turn around and just go, it's just a pile of rubbish, There, and that's the thing. If you can stand up and back up the reasons why you don't like it, whatever they are, and you don't have to be kind of like really precise, like,
sure.
oh, the characterizations are bad or anything. If it's just not hitting you where you want it to hit, that's okay. It's obviously when you start kind of bringing in kind of politics and other nonsense that really don't kind of deserve to be
It's
discussed in the same way.
Yeah, I actually brought this up to Mr. Newell last week, here we are getting ready to go into a presidential election here in the U.S. and
general election over here as well.
Yeah. So I mean, the hate and vitriol between people just because of a political belief really. Look, I was young once. I got that worked up over things. As I've gotten older, I just realized there's a lot more important things in life to get worked up over.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're all going to face sadness and despair in our life. So why add more to it now by some political belief? And the same thing with the newer Star Wars. Like, I really, again, I love the character of Kenobi, so I was in on that show, no matter how good or bad it was.
Yeah.
And again, it was an okay show. The Book of Boba Fett had some really great parts, but other times I was kind of like, it's okay.
Yeah.
I actually was kind of all in on the Ahsoka show. Besides the stomach saber gut thing, that I felt like after Kenobi, I was like, well, we won't see that again, will we? And then we got it again. I was like, can we please quit with the saber stabbing in the gut and not dying thing? I mean, I poor Qui-Gon. I love that character. He's the only one that was going down with that.
And the thing is, actually, the 25th anniversary of Phantom Menace, we were all sat watching Phantom Menace on the big screen, and like, you're reminded like what a big moment that was, that he dies, with a like a lightsaber through the gut, and then like you're just like, wow, things are really changed in the last 25 years, haven't they?
I guess the healthcare system improved in the Star Wars universe.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, so look, again, those nitpicky things, and it's something that I talk about with everybody. But we can talk about some of the Acolyte stuff and mix it in with other stuff here right now. I'm overall pleased with Acolyte, and while it's not the first or second season of The Mandalorian to me, it's something I want to see, and it's a storyline I want to follow, and I'm really kind of interested to see what they're going to do in these last 3 episodes, because I think they've added enough plots and twists that we still don't know where these last 3 are going.
Right,
like,
exactly.
I think we all had a feeling that Kimir was possibly the skinny guy, Smilo grin or whatever, I mean, I think there was a lot of people going, I think that's, and yes, it ended up that way. Spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't watched. But overall, I sit there and I think, for me, sometimes, and I'm repeating myself, so people who listened last week, it's sometimes the set feel doesn't feel like Star Wars to me, and it feels. I want it to be expansive. I want it to be big. And, I was never a Game of Thrones person, which I'm now getting ready to probably jump into, because Alfie and D-Doc on our show are kind of religious Game of Thrones people. And they tell me every week, how can even House of Dragon look the way it looks on similar budgets to The Acolyte? And they're like, we want that feel on The Acolyte. If you put the story of The Acolyte on that kind of expansive feel, they're like, we would be off the charts for this show. So really, that has been my little hold up. I do want to see where the story goes, and I'm interested in it. I don't really have. I told Mark, the chant was a little goofy, but other than that, I mean, the whatever in the mini, okay. But each, I guess, there's probably other weird songs or whatever in Star Wars that, I mean, heck, the Cantina song alone, people could probably exactly. I mean, there's enough weirdness of that, but I think that also comes with age. Like, I'm now 53. If I would be watching this at 25, I would be like, oh, cool. It's just another song in the mix.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's but that is, age is a big no, but it is because like I think like everything got me when I was up until about 41. Like, you put Star Wars on a big screen, and like you hear the first bar, and I well up and stuff like that, and there's so many times I can kind of look back, and like people would just kind of laugh at me for getting all super emotional, and then it's like I matured literally over a course of 6 months, because then like either that or must get massively depressed because then nothing seems to do it. And so, like, I mean, I'll watch this stuff, and actually, this week's episode of The Acolyte was probably the first time that I really emoted, and as I kind of said in the reaction chat, you know, I actually clapped when Yord kind of like got his neck snapped, because I mean, partly because I was just kind of like, well, on some levels, I don't necessarily think that. I mean, Jackie was actually quite a surprise because it's like,
too,
oh, these
yeah.
guys are gonna stay, like, survive to the end. I didn't even think, you know, there wasn't even like a thought in my mind that those characters weren't going to make it to the end of this first season, you know, and because I was just like, well, you know, that's kind of how it is. But then it kind of slightly frustrated me because I don't think the character development was quite as strong as it needed to be, from at least for me to really kind of go, oh my god. I mean, I just did it because obviously hashtag, you know, Yordhorde, and everybody kind of jumped on board, and you could just hear like the screams of like millions of people like hashtagging Yordhorde, and kind of like, you know, suddenly having to grieve over like the fact that their leaders died. But that's just how it is. I mean, so to your point about scale, me and the missus, we're rewatching House of Dragons season 1. Season 2 started, and we're like, I kind of feel like we need to rewatch it just to remember, like, the, you know, the characters and stuff. And the first time I watched it, I was like, it looks okay, but it actually, I thought it felt small and lower budget than like Game of Thrones.
Sure, I can
And
see that.
yeah, and because I guess it's like, well, you know, HBO, they've done a sensible thing. It's a new season. Whilst it's the same franchise, they're not kind of putting 300 or 400 million into the season, partly because they probably don't have to pay the cast that much money, you know, for one. But then, you know, so this time around, you know, I'm still watching it. They're on the boats and the dragons are flying, and I'm just like, yeah, the VFX hasn't got any better with, you know, with time. That it kind of looks more TV. The thing is, they're using a lot more real world environments. You know, they're shooting outdoors, and that's kind of where Andor kind of got it right, I think, for the most
I agree.
part. You know, now Shinfield Studios, where they shot, is it Shinfield? Yeah, it's Shinfield, where they shot The Acolyte. It's a new studio, so it's quite big, but I don't think the sound stages are as big as they needed to be, because the forest, at least in episode 4, when it was lit for day, it felt like it was very much a studio. And I think what you had a disconnect because they clearly shot some of that outside, you know, all the big walking around on the top of the fields. I think that might have been, was it Wales? I think it was. And so that, you know, you've got the scope there, but they're then gone into a set and they're not using it with, say, like a volume. So therefore you don't have that kind of infinity. But then when you do shoot with volume, it seems to be very limited anyway. And I think what we're kind of dealing with is two things. We're dealing with just like the scale of TV, but also because this is Star Wars, and this is my point, not because it's a scale of TV, but because it's a Star Wars, they have to have really high quality like CGI and visual effects. So that's probably taken up more of a budget than actually, you know, if it was a film, you know, you could do stuff on a bigger soundstage. You could run through like a feed palace and like Coruscant and stuff, you know, a lot easier without it feeling kind of contained.
Sure.
You know, so it's a difficult one.
It's so. This was something I meant to bring up to Mark last week because we had a similar discussion, but we talk about it on Rule the Galaxy quite a bit. Is you know, in the 70s, in the 80s, when film was done a completely different way, and you had that granular feel about it. Do you think some of the scale part of it was hidden and blurred in? Because, I mean, now everything's so crystal clear, 4K, you know, high definition, to where we're seeing things that maybe should be more, you know, more back like that, to where it's not so, hey, I can see the pimple on that guy's head, three people back, right? I mean,
there is a bit of that. Yeah, there is definitely a bit of that. I mean, things kind of lit differently as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought for the most part this series has been lit quite bright compared to some of the other stuff. Like Ahsoka felt quite dour and quite kind of sat down, for lack of a better term. And again, that one kind of didn't feel like it had the scope. Like when they were on that, when Sabine and Ezra are kind of on the planet on the other side of the, other galaxy, it felt still like they had just done that on a like either a green screen or like rushed in the volume. It just didn't feel it. It's and I hate using this because it gets overused, but it's that uncanny valley where it just doesn't quite work. It's not quite, and this is the thing. It's like a good shot should have, if you're going to compose a shot, you want to have loads of layers, so the eye is led from one to another. And I think that's partly what's happening, Matt. You don't tend to have so much foreground and midground and then background. You just tend to have, like with the volume, everything's in the background when you have foreground, really.
Right.
And also, like with the Acolyte, I've noticed they tend to just do a lot of two shots. It always seems to cut from like a two shot to like the reverse of a two shot, and there's not much kind of big close ups. You don't get the emotion so much. It's just one of those. It's a stylistic choice,
Sure.
And Star Wars tends to not do anything too like off, on the shoulder. It tends to be fairly kind of like static. They tend to seem to do stuff very much on like tripods, and we set the shot up, we'll hit record, we let the stuff kind of like play out, and when we do that, and I think sometimes that compared to other shows now starts to maybe, whilst it's a language that we have and it's kind of a visual language of Star Wars, sometimes feels maybe slightly dated. But then the problem is, the moment you change that visual language, does it stop feeling like Star Wars? That's one question. And then the other question is, if you do that, do you then draw attention to it? And of course, the thing is with stars.com, because they're so keen to push everything, they'll be like, oh, we changed how we're doing the cinematography. It's a brand new way of working. And then that draws attention to it.
Right.
Sometimes it doesn't necessarily work. You just let the work speak for itself.
And Brent on our show is really, God love him. He's done a good job of bringing me more to reality on this. And when I say that is, I used to get myself so amped up for a show or a movie and get my expectations so high that no matter what was going to go on, 1 second, got a frog in my throat.
Okay.
Sorry about that. But now I like Acolyte's one of the first ones that I've gone into and said, I'm not going to let myself know too much about it. I know kind of the general feel of it, but I'm not going to have any sneak spoilers, anything brought my way. I'm going to go episode to episode and feel this thing out. And, I actually think that one of the discussions we had that was brought up was this, I'm guessing this was the lightsaber battle or the fight that maybe some of the showrunners had said, hey, this is going to compare to Revenge of the Sith or Phantom Menace or whatever, Duel of Fates. I didn't feel it was at those scales, but I will say this. In my opinion, it was the best lightsaber kind of battle scene we've had in Disney Star Wars.
Yeah.
It felt really good to see 20 out of 30 minutes be battle, right?
Yeah.
Action. And I was like, okay, I'm sold on this. Maybe, and I think it comes with age again, maybe 6 months from now, maybe once the show is over and I go rewatch it all straight through, maybe it's going to mean more like the Duel of the Fates or the end of the Revenge of the Sith or something like that. But right now, it just felt like really good action scenes, and it didn't have that. I think part of it was you mentioned Jecki and Yord, right?
Yeah.
I'm the good guy, right? Like the only bad characters I like are Darth Bane and Asajj Ventress. I am all the time, give me the guy with the white cowboy hat coming in and saving the day, and give me Kenobi and Luke and how they're just, they hold themselves above to a different level, right? So, but I feel like both Jecki and Yord were those kind of characters.
Yeah.
And so we didn't get the character development we wanted for them. But I still, when each one of them was gone, I was like, man, those were two that I was really kind of wanting to see more of.
Yeah.
So maybe
Yeah.
this scene will have that later on because those characters are kind of characters that I'm drawn to. I don't know.
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, I think like they both served a purpose, and Yord very much, I think, was kind of like he was the prime example of like Jedi, like a younger Jedi who's basically for lack of a better term, kind of he doesn't know any better,
Right.
because that's how he's been brought up. So like all that, when he's talking to Osha, I think it was, and he's saying about how like this dude doesn't fight by any kind of like known method and that, and it's like that's because like you've been shown maybe 7 like forms of lightsaber combat, and then how to probably defend against 7 forms of lightsaber combat. I mean, if somebody kind of comes in and freestyles it a little bit, you're kind of caught out,
Right.
especially if they've got the force, and I suppose that's the other thing to consider is like, well, probably if they've had any form of combat experience up to that point, it's probably been with a non-force user, or obviously, in the real world, and then it's only going to be their peers when they're sparring. So that's, I think that's one thing to consider, And Jackie actually, I mean, I liked the fact that she was very by the book. She was the one who was, she was reading her May's Miranda rights before she
Right.
was getting arrested. I mean,
Right.
I think I said at one point to Mark, it's like I almost kind of was hoping that this series was going to be like the Star Wars version of Law and Order a little bit, And I think we had kind of got, this is meant to be a bit of a thriller and stuff like that, and it kind of is, but it's not maybe a thriller in the same respects as I was thinking it was going to be. And I mean, and I'm like, for the most part, I've never really kind of read into spoilers. Like I kind of consume the official content. So like the first time I'll talk about Star Wars will be when a trailer kind of gets dropped, and then that's my first real kind of like hint of it, so which sometimes makes it difficult, doing stuff with Fantha Tracks because we get a lot of that stuff through.
Right.
But that's, and some of the guys are quite, happy to talk about it and what have you. And I'm just like, I don't want to, because I don't want to come up with that expectation, of like, I
Right.
mean, I'm thinking back to 1999 again, when everybody was like, oh my God, Phantom Menace is going to be the best thing ever. And I don't necessarily know if most people knew what they wanted from a Star Wars film, but obviously I think for the most part, some people came out of the cinema and what they saw wasn't what they were, what
Right.
they wanted. Whereas I went in having only seen the trailers, on a tiny little kind of like video on my PC, my
Slow
486.
moving. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It took like 4 hours to download and stuff. I'll dial up for something that's probably about 100 megs, yeah, and then you're just like, okay, well, this is it. And I mean, I think maybe it's also I've always kind of put my faith a little bit in the creatives, a little bit in the people driving it. I don't tend to want to second guess them because like you don't know the conversations that they're having, and you don't know what's coming down the pipe or how how things are relating. We're meant to kind of consume this on a on a like almost a face value kind of perspective. Watch it, consume it, and I'll talk about it and discuss it. But I think what we've kind of grown very accustomed to doing is to second guess everything as well.
Oh yeah.
Second guess the motivations of why they've done this, or and it's very difficult because like unless you're in that room, in that writer's room, or in those exec meetings, like you have you can only speculate really, so
It's a really weird thing, and I never thought that I'd be involved in any kind of media related to Star
yeah,
Wars, right?
sure,
My son and I started this to be a dad and a son talking about Star Wars. My buddies joined in, and now we've been doing this. But you're right, because sometimes it takes the enjoyment out of it because you have to nitpick or second guess or think
yeah,
things through when actually you just want to sit back and say, just put the content in front of me, let me enjoy it. Oh, by the way, and if I enjoy it, let me go buy the action figure of it.
exactly,
Exactly,
yeah,
the lightsaber of the character we like, what have you. And so it does. It starts feeding the beast of, well, now it's like me. I have to nitpick. Okay, the scene didn't look 100% right. Well, really, I mean, I watched the show. I enjoyed the show. Why do I have to nitpick that one little part?
yeah,
I don't know why. It's probably because now that I do this, I have to think to myself, what are some things I'm going to talk about on the show?
That's
Right?
part of it. It's like
Yeah.
making sure you've got enough content because I mean sometimes like with Ahsoka, I watched the episodes and we would literally go and record and I was just like, I don't really know what to say, you know, and it's not because I didn't like the episode, but I was just like, yeah, you know, it was so kind of like felt a little bit left field. You're just like, okay,
Yeah.
you know, and the thing is like everybody's saying, oh, you know, in Filoni we trust and stuff, and so you kind of have to just go with that. And
Yeah.
but I mean, like for the Acolyte, the one thing that the only real kind of criticisms we had, some of the editing seems a little bit off in places, like there's some continuity issues, not necessarily like with things appearing and disappearing, like, you know, bits of costume and stuff, but like
Right.
like placement and stuff. It happened like in last week's episode, but in this week's episode, the one thing that really kind of bugged me was the use of wipes when really I didn't think they needed to use a wipe. They kind of like they'd be running through a forest and then they just wipe out, and it's just like a wipe needs to be. It's a transition really from one location to another, but not just like, you know, 20 yards over in that direction. It's got to be like a, you know, different sector or even a different time, you know.
Yeah. See, I never would have even thought about that, but you're right. Now thinking about it, it's like, okay, here goes Yord and Osha over here, wipe, and then we're back over to the battle right over here,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's like you're exactly right. It could have almost been a scan or a different way to go in. Yeah.
Yeah, a
So,
swish pan would be cool. They've not used swish pans actually in Star Wars, but also like the wipes tend to be about 20 odd frames or 25 frames long. So that's like a second. That's quite a long time, you know, in screen time because it kind of develops and then you kind of wipe through. And you tend to, you know, the theory is the wipe is leading your eye to where you want it to focus next. And I think like it might have been when May was running through, it might have been Osha running through the forest, and it did a circle wipe out. And I'm just like, it just seemed like it must have been one of those kind of things of like, how do we get out of this one in the edit suite? And we're like, I don't know, let's stick a wipe in. Yeah, that kind of works. And you know, which is kind of fine, you know, but
so my wife is not a huge Star Wars fan. She's a fan because she watches the stuff with me. I don't know about your wife if she does. Oh, okay, I know it's something you love. I'm going to watch it with you, right? But she's watched these episodes. She could not tell you. She wouldn't be able to tell you about a set. She wouldn't be able to tell you about a wipe. She just at the end she'd go, I kind of like that one, or that one wasn't as good as last week, and you're going, man, why don't I just watch it like that and just take it in like that anymore? That would be
it'll be a short podcast. Can you imagine? Be like, hi, welcome to Rule of Galaxy. So what did you all think? Yeah, it was all right. Yeah, brilliant, great. Okay,
we'll
see you next week.
I love it.
But, yeah, Karen's the same. In fairness, like she is. I tell her off all the time. You can tell her engagement level by how much she uses her phone during an episode.
Yes.
And we didn't get a chance for her to watch episode 4 like last week, so we watched 4 and 5. Which for me, I was kind of like, this is really cool because these kind of meant to run into each other. And so I was watching it and kind of going, yeah, I kind of wish actually this could have just been a 50-minute episode, maybe a 45-minute episode, and cut down some of the nonsense in like, you know, episode 4. And so like by the time she was watching it, and then she kind of lost interest by the end of episode 4. And then so she kind of really missed the reveal, and then she kind of just, I was like, you've got to watch the next part. And I go, did you see that? And she's like, what? You know, looking up from her phone and going, he just headbutted a lightsaber.
Now, see, right there, that's one of the things that I did want to talk to you about, because that one right there, that I thought that was awesome. And Alfie, we call him the Book of Alfie because we just go to him like a reference book on our show. And because Boba Fett's his favorite, so Book of Boba Fett, Book of Alfie, whatever. Anyway, so we're sitting there, and he was like, you know, that's cortosis, right? And I was like, what? Whoa, wait a minute. I didn't even look into that yet. We just watched the episode.
I was the same.
Yeah. And so I'm like, wait a minute. So Alfie, I posted some stuff out today, and he's like, remember, Darth Tenebris died in a cortosis mine, right? Bane, before he became a Sith, was a miner in cortosis. And you know, and I'm going, wait a minute. Whoa. I completely forgot about that. But those little Easter eggs, those little crumbs that they drop, I mean, that's awesome. That's great
Yeah.
that they add that stuff in.
And also, because this is the thing, because I was talking about this actually at work earlier on today with somebody, and I was saying that I don't necessarily, obviously the helmet, and I think he had gauntlets on or like a brace
Yeah.
or something, but like cortosis isn't as strong as like Beskar. It's quite a weak kind of like mineral.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to almost weave it in. So I wouldn't be surprised if the whole like the cape and all that is kind of like maybe got cortosis in it as well, you know. But I mean that's the thing, isn't it? It's like I suppose, and it's very difficult when you know, and
Yeah.
and you're like, you know, you're like the Leonardo DiCaprio meme. You're like, oh. But if you don't know, then either you do one of two things: either you go, well, that was cool, or you
Yeah.
go, what the hell was that? You know, that doesn't happen. And I think, you know, I mean, it's a you know, the unknown is quite a blissful state to be in. It's that pure ignorance of being able to consume this, you know, as entertainment, like it's meant to be
Sure.
seen as. But then you start, you know a little bit, or you remember a little bit of like EU and what have you. Then it's like, oh God, you know. And then of course you have to then kind of go onto YouTube and watch for, you know, 75 things you missed from, you know.
I can't do those. I tried them a few times and I was like, nope, too much.
Yeah.
I like you said, the ignorant bliss. I would rather learn from Alfie like 3 things that I missed than go watch one of those videos. And not that there's anything wrong. Those guys do a good job.
Oh, they do an amazing job.
But it's
Yeah.
just brain overload, right? Then I start
Yeah.
going, oh man, how did I miss all this, and this?
But
I
some
don't
of
know.
that still is speculation. Some of those videos kind of still end up leading down the speculation route. You almost literally just want somebody to go, right, this, and this is definitely confirmed.
Right.
And, you know, and then make your kind of like your speculation points, you know, so.
Well, if it was done up with all the cortosis and it does have those lingering effects or those nod of the cap to the EU stories, I think that's fantastic. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in I want at some point in time the lines to connect, right? Like
Mhm.
I would be very happy if something that's happening in either the High Republic or in Acolyte ends up being a touch point in the sequel trilogy. That would make my
Yeah,
day. I don't need
totally.
every void filled, but major things or things that can connect and make me feel like it's a more well-rounded story, that means a lot to me.
Yeah.
So seeing something like that, and even though Bane and the Plague Ensemble are not canon, I mean, let's face it, most everybody is drawing from the EU on these stories
Exactly.
anyway.
Yeah. Well, Bane, at least as a character, is
Yes,
kind of now,
canon,
which is
yes.
kind of good. But then, like again, it's like it was a cameo for Mark Hamill, and was it the Lost Missions of the Clone
Yep.
Wars? And like when he was on screen, I was like, that's not what I kind of remembered him looking like. But hey ho, that's just how it is, you know. And the yeah, I mean, like for me, like you know, I'm trying to not even like with Mark even try and talk about how you reconcile this whole thing, like if this guy's a Sith, how, you know, does that mean everybody dies and stuff like that, you know, the whole kind of like Coyote Monday kind of nightmare.
Yeah,
I'm kind of more with you. I'm rooting that this guy maybe becomes like Ren or the Ren.
correct. I
And
heard you
then
mention that. I thought that was
yeah,
a great idea on that,
and
especially with the Kylo Ren music being in that ending scene there or what have you.
yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like the helmet and all that kind of stuff, you know. So I mean, you know, but then at the same time, if he is Sith, and as long as, I mean, I was gonna say, like, as long as it's done well, but really it doesn't need to be done well, because you look at the end of Revenge of the Sith, you know, and how many loose threads there were before the last 10 minutes, and suddenly everything
Mm-mm.
gets kind of nice, you know, say nicely wrapped up, rushed, wrapped up, but
Yeah.
basically wrapped up really in the only kind of like logical way of doing it, you know. So I think it all kind of comes down to whether or not people are expecting another like a big twist, and this was
Right.
just a like a distraction, or if this is it, and now what we're going to see in the next 3 episodes is really trying to understand how these characters get to where they are, which is what I think we probably will end up doing, really.
I think one, to go back to your Revenge of the Sith thing, and this is a side note. I know George didn't want to break his trilogy rule, but that should have been 2 movies. Just it had the potential to be 2 full movies, right? The lead up and then the not wrapping it up in 10 minutes like you said, but wrapping it up over longer period of time. That's just my 2 cents. I don't know. I love Revenge of the Sith, but I think it might have been okay for him to break his own rule and say, okay, we're going to do 4 of these trilogy,
Yeah.
part 1 and part 2 of the third spot. So
I mean, yeah, possibly. But at the same time, I just wonder if you were to go back and say look at the trilogy as a whole, keep it as a trilogy, and go actually right. Let's just nip out the stuff we don't need, and then put in the stuff that we do need. So just
true.
You know, I don't know. It's odd actually because like nowadays, yeah, like a trilogy seems like a slightly dated model. With all these kind of like
Yeah. How many Avengers movies are we going to have? Right. I mean,
exactly. Fast and Furious 58 and all that. So
true. So one of the things you brought up that stuck with me is the Stranger. Kimmer. I don't know the
Kimir, I think.
So with him saying the word Sith, and the
Yeah.
only person I believe was around at the time was Soul, correct?
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm almost of the belief that, I mean, he just took out 7 of the 8 who were there. I'm of the belief that Soul has to be gone by the end because of that one statement, like you mentioned, Kiadi Mundi. Oh, the Sith haven't been around for a millennia. Well, if it's never brought up to the High Council, right? I mean, but how's the easiest way for it not to be brought up? Everybody's gone.
Yeah.
Or that one person's hiding it for political reasons back in the Jedi Council. So
yeah,
I don't know. I didn't want Yord and Jackie to go, but I see where they can't just have 3 or 4 people running back going, "Hey, everybody, we saw a Sith." It's so I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
So a couple of my thoughts is one is because like, and it's still weird that like, and I don't know if it's just stars.com using it because they don't want to kind of put out any spoilers for somebody who might have not seen the episode, but they still seem to be kind of pushing the whole stranger character rather than it's like stranger / Kamir. But so it's one of 2 things. I think possibly he could have just used like, oh, this is what you would think of me as.
Okay.
Like you would refer to me as a Sith, but actually, and this comes back to my Ren point, I'm actually so and so of whatever, and because I've seemed to have made a really big point in this and obviously High Republic to say, hey, the galaxy isn't binary. It's not just Jedi and Sith. There's like all these other different Force users all around the place, and they all have slightly different like means and like takes on the Force and the thread and everything else. So you kind of it could just be that, and it could be the Jedi might call them Sith, but they might I guess identify, for lack of a better term, as something else.
They might just lump them in together. You're right.
Yeah,
anybody who's not tapped into their line of thinking of the Force might be considered that, because I mean, you have the witches from the very beginning with the Coven. You have him. You have the witches from Dathomir.
The witches from the other planet, galaxy, who probably have a slightly different,
correct
take on that.
Well, and Tales of the Empire, weren't there 2 different types of witches? There were witches from the countryside, and then witches from.
Well, that's it. Dathomir, like, and again, this is kind of where I think maybe like legends and canon kind of blur a little bit, because like I think there was different clans, and so you had like the Singing Mountain clan, and they all slightly, again, had slightly different approaches. A bit like how civilization kind of developed, way back in the medieval times, and even earlier than that, since the dawn of man. People have slightly different belief systems and that, and then normally a larger, a stronger belief system kind of comes in and then normally forces everybody else to kind of think one way or the other.
Right.
It's kind of a bit meta really as to what is going on, at the moment, and I don't like bringing up stuff like that because like I don't really know what I'm talking about, but it kind of is, it seems a bit, like a bit on the nose. So it's probably not the intention, but
no, I mean, look, I think sometimes cinema or TV should mimic the real world, and sometimes it should take you away from it completely.
Yeah,
exactly. And as long as they're not shoving down your throat
exactly
the real world, but just showing you maybe a reflection of it, or maybe showing you an angle of it, that's okay if it's done in an artistic way. I don't have a
Yeah.
problem with that. So
Yeah, exactly. So that's my theory, is that possibly he's not a Sith, and or the other thing is that he is the apprentice to the Sith master, hence
yeah,
why he hasn't been given his Darth name yet. And because I mean, again, it's like an acolyte becomes an apprentice,
correct.
so therefore, if he's after an acolyte, then he's probably not the big guy in charge. So it could be that actually it is Plagueis, and I kind of think, because I don't know obviously how long like Biff lived for, but I kind of think that it wouldn't be a stretch to kind of say Plagueis is, the Sith in charge at this point. And because we're 100 years out from the fall of the Empire, so we're 100 years out from the end of Revenge of the Sith,
Correct.
as
So
opposed
we're
to
15 years out from, right, or 85 years out from.
75, 80, 85, something like that. So therefore you can go, well, that's not really, the grand scheme of things, but you don't have to be a Wookiee to live for like 300 years old. There's got to be loads of other examples in the galaxy of creatures that live longer.
And honestly, I'm okay if it's Plagueis. I don't mind if it's Plagueis. Palpatine would be way too young.
No.
So I would be good if it was Plagueis now.
Yeah.
And then they could still do a story later on of, okay, here's how, Kimir's out, and now he goes and recruits.
Exactly.
Palpatine, right?
That's your season 2 or season 3.
Yes. Yeah. I'm down with that. Yeah. I think that sounds great. Yeah.
Right,
look
so
at us. We're planning it out.
It. I'll call Kathy.
Yeah, she'll talk to you. You're a big, between you and Mark, a big TV guy and a big writer guy. The two of you together, she'll go for it in a heartbeat.
She's an honorary member of Fantha Tracks, and I mean, Mark does email her.
Oh my goodness! Don't even get me started. Couldn't even imagine having those kind of contacts. Anyway,
he literally, I said, "Can I?" He's like, "No, not in a million years." Because you'll send like a Valentine's card or something, like a Valentine's e-card. It'll be really cringy. It's not going to work.
Oh my gosh. Were you much into the expanded universe back, in all the books and everything?
Yeah. Because I was.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So I was. Because I'm a shade younger than you and Mark, so I consider myself second generation. So I really got into Star Wars with Zahn's first Empire trilogy.
Okay.
And so I was neck deep in the expanded universe, and I think that's one reason why I kind of sat in the cinema with Phantom Menace and was quite happy to just accept what I was going to get, because we had the good, the bad, and the waru of expanded universe, and you just kind of go, some of that stuff was really bad,
Oh yeah.
It's just one of those things. So.
I tell my son all the time. He's in the entertainment industry and does a lot of comedy. And I say, everybody will talk about Saturday Night Live, and they'll talk about how it's the greatest, and from the 70s to the 90s. Oh my gosh, I went through that. I lived it, and I try to tell him, I remember or people remember one skit from an episode, and the rest of it usually was trash, or it'd be like trash, good, but we only remember the really, really good skits that were from that.
Well,
and it's the same thing with the EU. Like we loved it. I loved it. I know Mark loved it, but we don't focus on that book. That one was kind of a throwaway book, but the ones that hit, I mean, they hit so well, and that's what you focus on. You remember the ones that got you all motivated and excited.
But also, what's interesting about that is that I really quite liked Children of Jedi, and I was talking about it the other day, and Mark, I think, kind of just rolled his eyes a little bit, but it's just it was so not polarized, if somebody didn't like that book, was it, what did they call it? Was it The New Rebellion, that one, and Crystal Star? I can remember reading those. It's like, oh my God, and Planet of Twilight, just those ones. I just, I had to kind of claw myself through it, because I just, really just couldn't get on with them, but others, the Jedi trilogy, Kevin J. Anderson's stuff like that, and so some of it is just amazing.
Well, I really enjoyed the New Jedi Order. I really enjoyed the Fate of the Jedi, the Legacy of the Jedi. Even though there were some of the longer, spread out, book thing, but when it got to be that Jaina Solo and Jason Solo and Anakin Solo, all those kind of things, I was like, I can dig all this. This is okay.
Yeah, it felt natural progression. It didn't feel kind of
correct.
I mean, and I think it's partly because you think in Heir to the Empire, Princess Leia, Leia is pregnant, so it's like this is a new era from book one, but not suddenly you've got 5 or 6 kids all running around and stuff. And I thought it was quite nice, like when Luke went off with Ben and stuff like that, and Fate of the Jedi. I mean, it's I mean, the New Jedi Order was a struggle. It started off good, but then it kind of meandered a bit, and and the thing is, then to try and get somebody to read it, you go, oh, it's 20 books or whatever.
Yes,
that's a commitment.
And I think I was goofy enough to make that commitment. So yes, there were those dips in it, but man, when it hit just right, I was like all in. But the reason I brought that up is, and I'm not a big rumor person, but obviously if they're looking to do Ahsoka season 2, I guess the word is out there looking to replace the Baylan Skoll character or replace the actor, obviously. So I'm happy for that. I didn't want them to have to do that, but I think the story meant and needed to have that character in it. He did it so well, maybe it'll be hard to replace, but I'm hoping they can pull it off. But I saw somebody mention Abeloth, who was the female character from
that's
the Fate of the Jedi series.
She was kind of like a bit, if memory serves correct, a bit like a Medusa, wasn't she? Kind of a bit of a soul sucky kind of.
Yes. Yeah. And so I right then and there, I was like, I know that name, I know that character, and I went and looked it back up, and I thought, that wouldn't be a bad, with the way they're going with the witches and with the undead troopers and all that. Abeloth wouldn't be a bad character to add into that mix right there. That kind of would be fun to take another EU thing and drop it in there just to spice up the story. So
I think, I think I'll be up for that. I mean, I think also, and I think the unique thing from the New Jedi Order was obviously the Yuzhong Vong. They came from another galaxy or like outside. Now, I mean, it doesn't have to be them as such, but I really like the idea of like there being Jedi who are faced with somebody who doesn't resonate in the Force, and how that all kind of works. Now, that I think that's quite interesting. Especially from a TV perspective, I think it'd be quite interesting to explore that in a show. But again, that you probably need to be looking at like the Rey movie onwards for that, because there isn't Jedi, unless you do.
I think look, I'm not one to say this is how this needs to be or whatever, but one of the things I would hope was, I'm looking forward to the Rey movie and hoping that they take something, I don't care who it is, it can be the Yuzhong Vong, it could be someone else, and putting a character, like you said, like the Force doesn't affect them or they can't be affected by the Force kind of thing, as the bad guy, instead of another version of the Empire or another version of the First Order. Give me an alien species or a different group of people coming in to be the baddie, and I'll sign up for that tomorrow. I like, let me buy my ticket now. So that's what I'm hoping, because again, on the sequels, I was okay with the First Order. Fine, it served its purpose, but if they would have done that then, kind of like in the New Jedi Order, at that time frame, the Yuzhong Vong or something like that, I think I would have been better, just because they're showing so many stories of how the New Republic was basically merging into what the Empire used to be, right? And so it's like all these big bureaucracies kind of turn into something similar, whether they're the Republic or the Empire or the Order or what have you. They all kind of at some point in time get bloated at the top and kind of put their thumb down on people, right? Exactly. So I don't know. I was just brainstorming and thinking.
I mean, it would be interesting, and you could do some of that stuff. Like, you could still kind of have JJ's mystery box of like, the first film like Force Awakens still be the hump for Luke Skywalker,
Yes.
and actually you've really got like a real definitive reason why you need him back. I mean, maybe they were, I guess, probably the thought process back then would have been, oh yeah, so how about this? Oh yeah, but we've just done that, but now I think they've introduced enough of the expanded universe, they're probably more comfortable with being able to kind of bring up these kind of like larger topics like that. But yeah, you could kind of see them back then. And also, I just don't know, it would be great, wouldn't it? Or even like just a way of maybe the First Order trooper armor is kind of like creates that kind of like Yusila Mari kind of like force bubble, so it's still kind of like, it's still like First Order Empire type stuff, but actually they've kind of got their enhanced armor, which then makes it impossible to
look. I tell you what, you're writing your own stories right now, and you didn't even know it. You can go now. You can give that to Mark and have him give that to Kathleen.
He can do some fan fiction. Yeah,
that's right.
Have you asked him about his fan fiction? You should definitely, next time he's on.
He told me about his old stories where he had Jedi off in outposts, and then to see that they had the Jedi, in these little things like in the Living Force and in Star Wars Rebels, where they kept finding the Jedi, places and everything. He did tell me about that. I still crack up every time. I'm like, I've been involved with Star Wars since I started this podcast in 2020. You got started in Star Wars when you were 12. I mean. Yeah, that's what isn't that what he wrote his first letter that got published or something like that? So I mean,
right, yeah,
come on.
I keep on saying to him that he needs to dig those out of a loft or something, wherever they are, and he should just put them on Fantha Tracks, just post them up, just because,
I will. Yeah, I will help you push him on that. I think he should do that. Matter of fact, I say at the next convention he should print up a bunch of them, get a little booth, and see how many people want to get a signed copy of them.
I bet, yeah. I'd be surprisingly there'd be more than he'd be expecting, but not as many as he was hoping for, probably. So,
well, I told you I was we're going to go in hours. I think we're we're right at that. Man, it's so fun talking to you, and I love that we can sit here and have chats on multitude of topics and see things sometimes 100% the same and sometimes a little bit different, and that's great. Mark brought it up in our conversation. He was like, "See, you can talk about something, and we're not fighting." He was like, "Isn't that wonderful?" And I was like, "Yes, it is." Now, maybe you would fight with some of my co-hosts because they're very outspoken on their thoughts on these things. I'm kind of the middle of the road guy. So
I mean, to be honest, if people have are outspoken, that's fine. It's everybody's entitled to their opinion. And I think that's the thing. It's how you get that opinion across, isn't it? And what have you. So
yep, it is.
It's the fun of discourse and pulling these things apart, because hey, we can't watch anything just as fans anymore. We've got to watch it as critics.
That's right. We are now unofficial critics. Well, you've got me even more motivated to go to the UK, so thank you for doing that. Now I'm going to go and sell my wife on, we're going to go see Jack, and we're going to go see stuff to do with Ted Lasso, and then I'm going to, by the way, I'm going to go hang out with the guys from Making Tracks. So we won't tell her that until we get there, though. So, but thank you again. Thanks for putting up with my craziness and our timing and all that. And let's get together real soon, and let's plan something out where even more of us get together and talk about stuff.
Let's do it. That sounds fun.
You got it. Well, thanks to Mark Mulcaster of Fantha Tracks, Making Tracks, and Everything Tracks, and Sky. We got to remember that. And thanks again for being a part of episode 275 of the Rule of the Galaxy podcast. And until next week, may the Force be with you.